their values. Now, of course, that's a tough order. And of course, none of us will ever achieve it 100%. But if we build relationships, the pressures from the folks with whom we have built the relationships will help us, in fact, to keep a trusting relationship, because when we cut the corners, I have found people with whom I have relationships tend to remind me I am cutting the corners and bring me back to a trusting position. So that if we can build relationships, these long-term, two-way caring for one another's, and if we can build them in a trusting way, and trust, by the way, the psychologists tell us, comes from consistency. I can count on you to do it a certain way. Now, I may not even like that. I may not even share your value, but I will trust you if I have a fairly good sense that that's the response I'm going to get, even if I won't like it, because you're consistent. The people we don't trust are folks that you never know where they're going to be. Do you know any people like that? You bring up a subject, you never know where they're going to come down on it. You know, it's always a gamble. And you never quite trust those people. Whereas think of the folks with whom you disagree. You may even disagree with them, and yet you are perfectly certain that their value system is going to bring them to a certain conclusion on most of the issues or topics you're likely to discuss with them. So trust, meaning consistency, builds relationships, and if we can build those kind of relationships, then indeed we have an open door to appeal to people to give us mutually rewarding behaviors. Why is all of this important? Why is a customer satisfaction model important? If you want some research on it, it's very simple. We know today from a number of studies that getting a new customer costs up to 6 times as much as keeping a satisfied customer. So this is why Nordstrom's and Dayton Hudson and Brooks Brothers and so many of the retailers have a no questions asked return policy. They don't like it when you bring back something you've already worn and they probably can't sell it again. Although don't worry about it, they give it to UNICEF or somebody and write it off. You know, it's not a total loss. But they don't like that. But they would rather do that and keep you satisfied and in their store than they would to lose you by questioning you. We work with Dayton Hudson, which was the originator of these policies. And I mean, it's really tough. Talk about behavior, changing our own behavior. You have to train the people at the return window so that when you bring back the jeans, you know, that you've been wearing for 6 months, that they don't say, oh, you want to return these, huh? I mean, none of that stuff. They have to just have a very straight face and say, yes, ma'am, how much did you pay for them, and here's your refund. Well, the other thing about customer satisfaction that makes it a truly behavioral activity today is that you cannot get customer satisfaction without having employee satisfaction. Dissatisfied employees do not deliver customer satisfaction. So stop to think of the power of one simple technique like a customer satisfaction model. It empowers the staff, the people who do the work, who are the organization. It empowers them to design their work to satisfy the customers. It ought to result with any kind of decent management and ingenuity in satisfied customers, and we know that management has to pay attention to employee satisfaction in order to deliver customer satisfaction. One technique, and it goes completely through the organization behaviorally. That's one. Now let's talk about constituency relations campaigns. If indeed opinion leaders are the folks who make the difference, these folks who influence others in their behaviors, then it follows that some way that we could get directly to them ought to have an incredible power. Well, a constituency relations program attempts to get directly to these people. And here's how it works. The first step is that you have to have, of course, a list of your opinion leaders. Do you in your organization have a list of who the real opinion leaders are in the key publics for you? Who are the opinion leaders among the various segments of your employee base? Who are the opinion leaders among your customers, shareholders, neighbors, government? Remember, opinion leaders aren't necessarily the official position people. In fact, usually today they have lost all sense of opinion leadership and everybody's mad at them. neither are opinion leaders the loudmouths, the one that always have an opinion, that are always popping up. Opinion leaders are a little more subtle and sophisticated than that, but we know how to find them. That's another subject. Good literature, again, on how to find opinion leaders. But you've got to have a list, you've got to make book on them, and you've got to track them. I have an ongoing argument with a popular PRSA member who for years was the Vice President of Public Relations of one of the large oil companies. And he and I have been good friends for a long time, and we always wished, since we've worked with a lot of consumer and environmental groups and he's with an oil company, we've always kind of wished that we would get on opposite sides, you know, of some big argument. It just never happened. He did such a good job for his company. They were never making these mistakes. But we had a deal that if we ever did get into a case where we were on opposite sides, that he got to have the media list. I couldn't even use the media list, but I got the opinion leader list. And I know what would have happened. I would have won hands down because I could have gone directly to the people. Do you have an opinion leader list? Please get one. It's easy to find out who they are, to work the network, and once you have one, you have the keys to the kingdom in public relations. Here's what starts to happen. On our list, we find out that John Jones in the south part of town is an opinion leader. A lot of folks really pay attention to John. And then we find out that Susie Smith, 2 towns over, is an opinion leader. And then when we check our network, we find out, aha, they happen to be brother and sister. She did the unmodern thing and changed her name when she got married, you see. So we wouldn't have known, but they're brother and sister. And then we find out that a couple of other opinion leaders up in another part of the state go fishing with them about 4 times a year, and they play bridge a few times every quarter. See what I'm on to now? Boy, I know the network of how ideas go through that society. There's only one way I will ever learn that, and that's by writing down these names, finding out what they do, who they know, how they conduct themselves, with an opinion leader list. Once we've got an opinion leader list, then inside the organization we look for some folks that we usually call something like key contacts, or we may call them ambassadors, or choose your name. These folks are volunteers from inside the organization who are willing to see a certain number of opinion leaders on a one-on-one basis a couple of times a year. Sometimes we have a long list of key contacts, and each one may only have a half a dozen opinion leaders that they're responsible for. We know other organizations where, in fact, the key contacts may have a large number. Doesn't matter. The point is, somebody inside the company as a volunteer, and from all levels and positions inside the company. This is not for managers. In fact, the further away from managers you can get, the better, as long as they're credible and knowledgeable folks. But of course, public relations professionals are going to train them to make sure they are knowledgeable and credible. We get these people together with these people. Now, usually those meetings occur about twice a year. Seems to be enough. The key contact gets in touch with the opinion leaders for whom he or she is responsible, and they sit down for an hour or so, and they just talk. There's no real agenda. The whole thing is set up on the basis of, hey, we know you're an opinion leader. We're trying to make our organization more conforming to what the people out there really want, and we need your input. Now, you'd think folks wouldn't want to have those meetings. The experience is exactly the opposite. There's a lot of ego involved in being opinion leader. It turns out that when you tell someone you're an opinion leader and we'd like to talk to you, they usually rise to the occasion. Well, at these meetings, some interesting things happen. 3 things happen at the meetings. As I say, about twice a year seems to be enough. You don't want to wear them out now. The first thing that happens at the meetings is lots of listening. Lots of listening. What's on your mind on our subject, about our product, our service, our issues, our topics, things that might affect us? What are you hearing? What are you doing? What are your friends doing? Then there's a little talking. We may have some ideas that our organization is considering, and we may want to say, hey, you know, we've been thinking about doing X. What do you think of that? What do you think your friends might think? And if you're in an organization that has some excitement to it that you can share with them, we kind of like to leave with a little Dick Tracy kind of an approach, as we call it. For example, one of the organizations that is using this almost universally has been the telephone system. And usually on those calls, at the end of the meeting, they'll have a Dick Tracy wristwatch. That's why we call it Dick Tracing, or some modern marvel of technology that they share, just, you know, to give a little fun to it all. The healthcare people and the educational people have so many good and unheard little stories like that that they can add into it, but it just makes it exciting. Now, after the meeting, and here's the key thing, the results of that session are put into a database. These databases have now been replicated by enough organizations that you can actually buy on the open market about 4 pieces of software that will keep this data. The problem is the same old problem. How do you get the key contacts to actually put the information in the database? It's sort of like getting people to turn in their hours or turn in their expenses, and so we use all the little tricks. If they're professionals, we understand that they will probably come back and give this information to their assistant or their secretary, and they'll put it in. If they're non-professional people, just a standard employee in the organization, we usually have a central office where they go to where someone puts in this data. But whatever you have to do, the data goes into the database. And right here is probably the most powerful public relations tool that we have ever found. Because if you're doing these meetings on a regular basis, that means you have rolling research constantly being updated. As the old information ages, new information replaces it. And this rolling research is telling us what the opinion leaders that our organization depends on are thinking, doing, saying, and hearing. If you had that in your database now for the opinion leaders that are important to you, do you think it would help your organization be better in sync, make better relationships that earn trust, that could in fact motivate people's behavior? I have to tell you that those people who are using the system report that indeed it does exactly that. This idea of constituency relations, however, goes even further. The next step for most organizations, once you've got the opinion leaders listed and you're visiting them, is to take a look at the organizational memberships. How many memberships does your organization have? How many people are out there in the Chamber of Commerce and Kiwanis and all of that? Generally, when you look at that, what you'll find is that the organization isn't covering the waterfront at all. Everybody goes to Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, or the Chamber of Commerce, or maybe a trade association or two. Well, that's probably not where the action is for you. So we simply take that list, and instead we make a list of the organizations that we ought to have eyes and ears in. And people are then assigned to those organizations. When they go to the organization's meetings, they listen a lot, hear what the table talk is, what's the scuttlebutt. Every 3 or 4 weeks, we may give them a little yellow card with a little something on it that they might ask next time they go to a meeting. We discovered that everybody goes to Kiwanis, let's say, and they all sit there and they talk about football and sex and politics and all those usual subjects. But they never bring up the organization they work for. So we send them out to say, hey, you know, something interesting happened at our place. Let me tell you about this and see what you think. See what we're doing? We're priming these people to be aware, to be sensitive to these issues, and we're getting their feedback, all just sitting around the table. All you got to do is learn to push football out a little bit and push politics out a little bit and get your subject in there, and there's a tremendous capability to build relationships and to learn from doing that. Many people take it beyond that. Some of them, of course, will have a speakers bureau. Many of you have speakers bureau. The problem with speakers bureaus usually is that speakers bureaus exist, and then we send out a little booklet that says, if you would like a speaker, call us. What a joke. The way speakers bureaus work is to pick the organizations you want a speaker in and the topic you wanted to speak on, and you place them. Only as part of the constituency relations system, you've already got the opinion leaders identified. You've already got the organizations you want to be closely in touch with identified and are represented there. So now the role of the Speakers Bureau becomes to go and raise issues that you can get this feedback on, and, of course, to reinforce your opinion leaders, because a certain number of them will be in that audience. Only, generally in constituency relations, it works like this. When a speaker